4 years, doing different things, mostly about architecture and mostly about performance and scalability. And I'm going to give you guys a bit of an update on what we are doing with the vNext, the Mojaloop vNext build. I have Elijah here with me, and I have the rest of the team on Zoom. They will be presenting their own part. So I'm going to get started. So we will do a bit of an introduction about what vNext is and how it came about. We will then proceed to a progress update where we are in this endeavor. Then we will do a live demo. And yes, it's going to be live, so if it fails, it's the demo gods. And then we will present a bit of a roadmap to see, so that everyone knows when we can start using this. Okay, so introduction. A bit of history and how we got to this. Initially, we started talking about the performance and the scalability of the system, and we had discussions about how can we make sure that we have a system that in the future, in the next 5 years or 10 years, we have an architecture that supports the scalability that we want because we want to be super successful. And that conversation led to an exercise that we called the performance and scalability proof of concept that I executed with Miguel 3 years ago already, almost. And what that exercise told us was, yes, there's a way for us to do Mojaloop, the inner Mojaloop, the inner services, split in a different way, architected in a slightly different way with a different design, a different distributed design that unlocks a lot more performance, not only performance in the sense of how fast a transaction can be, but also in the ability to scale, so to handle many more transactions or transfers in our case at the same time within that small latency. So this was a very important exercise that we did, and at the end of the exercise we got very clear view on how to do it, and also a lot of learnings on how to do it even better because we got really good numbers. So we got that benefit of we now know how to scale it really to big scales. We know how to make it fast and cheap because the scaling unit was really small. So that was the performance POC part of it. And then we proceeded to a different exercise, which was the reference architecture. And I'm going to go to a bit of what reference architecture is. And this is very generic, but a reference architecture is a set of documents that capture the essence of what a product needs to be doing. And those documents also provide guidance on how to implement future versions. Essentially, this is the dream. This is what the perfect scenario looks like. We will never get to this dream, but it's super important to have this in front of us every time that we make a change to the system. It allows us to make decisions that are either strategic decisions, which probably means that we're going closer to that dream and we're taking our system change by change to that reference architecture, or it's a tactical decision because sometimes we have to make those concessions and we know, well, this is a tactical decision. I need to do the wrong thing in terms of reference architecture, but it's the right thing for the project. So those need to be acknowledged and documented as such. So this is an important aspect. So this is what a reference architecture is in quick terms. What are the big goals for a declination of the reference architecture? So the reference architecture stays purposely on a high level of, we don't have a lot of details in terms of how to implement it, and that's on purpose. So if we have to implement that reference architecture, what are the fundamental goals that we agreed upon when we did this exercise? It needs to have cleaner and smaller code bases with less dependencies. This is an important aspect because you know how we do software, and we keep on adding and adding and adding and adding, and we never stop. Well, actually, the developers usually ask to stop, but that luxury is rarely conceded. So we don't have time to refactor anything, which means complexity grows as a result of adding functionality. It's the way it is. So we want code to be cleaner and smaller and with less dependencies. We want it to be easier to contribute and extend. This is fundamental. This is not a technical concern, but it is achieved by technical prowess or technical ability. So there's design patterns and principles that we can follow that will make things easier to contribute to. So we reduce complexity on the different parts. There's lots of tactics that we used. We want it to be easier to test fully, so completely testable in different levels, really fast. We want it to be easy to deploy and operate. And of course, we want it to be secure, performant at scale, and cost-effective. And I know this sounds like a bag of dreams, and it's everything that we want, but these are our objectives. So we need to have these as objectives so that we can build better systems. And then at the end, we have something that we discussed called the Mojaloop Marketplace. And what this is because we're building something that is easier to contribute and extend, and it's modular by nature, why not have a Mojaloop marketplace where people can contribute their modules that are certified, or we didn't discuss the details of this, but you know how typical marketplaces work, right? There's software that's an add-on to the Mojaloop. So we have the Mojaloop that does what it does really well, and then we have a partner ecosystem that produces software that extends and complements a Mojaloop marketplace. Again, we're talking about dreams, so we're not there yet. So how does all of this relate to vNext? And it's funny because in July 21, PI 15, if I'm getting this from my notes, so I think it was PI 15. When the reference architecture reported out on the exercise, we proposed a couple of scenarios. Either we fix what we have, or we create a new version in parallel, and we had sort of a hybrid solution. And the agreement was, let's build a new one, because there's a lot of change. It's really difficult to iterate those small things and those small changes with what we have today, and it's probably dangerous to do that in the code base that we have. We called it V2 back then. We're not very good with names. Now we call it vNext. So hopefully this is going to be something like V20 or V whatever the number when we are ready. I hope it's a lower number than 20, but let's see. So what is it in strict terms? So Mojaloop is the strict implementation of the reference architecture. That's it. So what we're doing is saying we will implement Mojaloop doing what it needs to do, what it does really well, but the inner structure is going to be different, and it's going to implement it according to the reference architecture. And according to the design that we came up with, the bounded context approach, this is borrowed from domain-driven design, which is each part does what it needs to do really well, and we don't mix business logic across the different parts of the system. And we did this for 7 months, this reference architecture, and we got at the end a very good design that we are implementing. And the good news is that as we implement it, we have never yet had to come to the DA asking to change the design reference, the reference architecture. That means that we actually did a good job. So what is it exactly? It's different architecture, as I meant. We're building it in parallel. We codenamed it vNext because we don't have much creativity on names. It's exactly the same feature set. It's a future version, as I said, maybe V20. It really depends on how we get this ready. And obviously, when this is released or ready to be used, there's going to be a migration path. So standard Mojaloop implementations, we will be able to migrate those. So ingest what we have in an implementation and put that in the new implementation, have it running in parallel for a while, and then transfer from one to the other. Obviously, this sounds magic. Usually it doesn't work like that, but that's the promise that we have. We also know that no Mojaloop implementation is vanilla, so that doesn't exist in business world. So it means that the SIs and our partners will have time, as soon as we release alpha, to start working on how to upgrade for the installations that they know that they customized. So this is really important that the alpha is released as soon as possible. This is the bounded context approach. And as you can see here, and this is straight from the reference architecture that we did 2 years ago. We separated each part or each area of what Mojaloop does in a specific bounded context, and we said we cannot have logic that executes a function related to a bounded context outside that bounded context. The business logic needs to be fully encapsulated in a bounded context. And this is really difficult to do, and that's why we took so long to get to this design, but we have it, and this is it. This is what we are implementing. I'm not going to go through all of this because I think some of you or most of you have seen this already plenty of times, but effectively what we're saying in here is that there's different areas of the system. Think of them like subsystems, because most of them have multiple services inside. There's different areas of the system that take care of one task alone, exclusively. So there's really nice, clean business logic. At the bottom, you can see that there's operational API, and then there's the APIs. That middle box, that box in the middle, that red one, this is exactly what it means. It's multiple APIs. Today, we are implementing the normal FSP IOP IntelliLedger API. That's obviously the Mojaloop API. In the future, we hope that we can implement ISO 222. And the good thing is that because the internals that you guys are seeing here, they are not, I don't want to say polluted, but they don't have details about protocol. It means that we can have another API that communicates to another protocol and then use the internal mechanisms just the same. So we can continue doing lookups, we can continue using our participants, our transfers, our quotes, etc. So this is the promise. Of course, there's going to be third-party APIs, hopefully. And how does it fit the pillars? That sentence, I just tried to put everything in there, but in reality, it's just, we are in the quality product pillar. Obviously, we're trying to deliver on all of the pillars. That's the objective. So how are we versus the promise? I'm sorry. This is the list of the main use cases that we are building. Well, the main use cases for the Mojaloop solution. So it does onboarding, and the main use cases, and by the way, this is a pre-alpha version. That's what we are working on to release the alpha version. And we are doing the happy path only. This is an important message. The onboarding is done. The lookups, the account lookup service, the built-in Oracle, and the remote Oracle connector, it's done. We have an example for the remote Oracle as well. The quoting is working as well. We have single quotes and bulk quotes working. The clearing is working, but it's not complete. So you will see later. We now have transfers. The settlements, and this is what Michael Richards and Jason Brewer were showing to you. We also have something on the settlement, so it's work in progress. It's sort of working already. And the accounts and balances, this COA is the chart of accounts because we have a split between the way we store the accounts. We have a chart of accounts, and then we have a ledger that is behind the chart of accounts, and we have two ledger implementations. We have a built-in one, which is not built for performance or reliability, and we have the Tiger Beetle one, which is built for high performance and high scalability. So essentially, the design that we have allows us to have the Mojaloop, all of the core things, all of the core services talk to the COA, which fronts the actual ledger that's behind. So the ledger is high performance, high scale when we need it. It's simplicity when we need it for simplicity as well. And the rest of the system carries on working exactly the same way. They see exactly zero differences. So, and this is done already. Cross-cutting concerns. So for those of you that have not been familiarized with this meaning, the cross-cutting concerns is a box where we put everything that we need to do in the platform that is not exactly related to one business functionality. So pretty much what we're saying is all of the things that you see listed in here, all of the parts of the software need some sort of functionality from this bounded context or from this package of functionality. We have authentication working with the built-in IAM adapter and the ability to connect to an external IAM adapter. So we will be able to connect to an Active Directory, for example, so that they provide users and passwords, and we can do authentication. So if you're using Active Directory, you'll be able to log into the Mojaloop switch with an Active Directory username. We have authorization. Again, this is a bit more complex. We have fine permissions for each activity inside each of the bounded contexts. So what it means is that every time that we need to do something that we, in the use case definition, determined that requires a special permission, we created a permission entry. And what we say then is, now the hub operator has the ability to create roles that encapsulate multiple permissions. So this is how we compose the roles. It's not reinventing the wheel, it's the usual mechanism. Roles contain permissions, individual permissions, translate to actions that can be performed, and then users and applications will be associated to roles. And that's how the association goes. So this is just a standard RBAC mechanism, so nothing fancy in there. What is fancy is our ability to integrate with any external provider for this. So again, we can integrate with an external provider for the authorization. So if you want your users to get your roles from Active Directory, a membership of a group or something like that, it's really easy. Because again, we have the abstraction in place. So you build a little file that has to implement a certain interface, you put it there, and you're talking to the new provider. And that's all you need. It's not that simple, but it is just one file. So platform configuration, this allows you to configure the business aspects of the Mojaloop platform without having to redeploy the platform. And what it does as well is automatically triggers the changes of the configurations in the applications that need those configurations. So again, we use the same logic. Each application has a certain set of configuration parameters that the application says, in order for me to work, I need you to tell me if I should run in way A or B. So I'm going to make this an option. And now a hub operator has the ability to change how that application runs on the fly. Obviously, this is not intended for big changes, but if there's small changes that we can make that are parameterized, this is what this is for. Auditing and logging. Auditing works in a, well, first, sorry, let me get back. Auditing is for auditors, and logging is for developers. I always start by saying this because there's a lot of confusion about those two things. So I'm going to go with the logging, which is easier. Logging is, as a developer or a hub operator, I want to go to a place that shows all of the technical logs of how the application is working, usually how it's not working. That's what we go for there. We go there for. So that's it. That shows lines of code being executed. It's very technical. It's not for anyone but the developers or anyone trying to troubleshoot what's wrong. Auditing is where we put all of the relevant activities that happen in the switch. So again, in the code, in the business code, the business logic, we have key moments where the code is calling an audit entry and saying an account was created by this person with this security context from that IP address. And that entry is created in the auditing system. The way it works is there's a client that works in the application, and then there's a server component. The client in the client application has a key, has a signature. And the logging entry is signed with that key. That entry is enveloped with that key, with that signature, sorry, and sent to the logging service. The logging service, sorry, the auditing service. The central auditing service picks up that, investigates the key, wraps it around another key, the central service key, and then deposits the layered message that has two envelopes inside. So it's the full message that has the server key, and then inside there's another message that has the client key. This makes it irrefutable. So we can now go to a auditing mechanism, and we can look at all of the entries, and we can cryptographically determine that they will not change and that they came from a certain key or a certain key pair, in this case, which is the server key and the client key. So this is super important for auditing purposes. And then we have the admin APIs and UI. Obviously, each of the bounded contexts has functionality. That functionality is exposed through an API. And the UI, what it does, and you will see it later, the UI uses the API, so we're still an API-first implementation logic. All right, this is the other picture that we created at the reference architecture. So this is a bit more technical, and it shows which parts communicate to which parts. And I've been showing this at every convening with the status update with little smiley faces. So the green ones mean that we have the main use cases, Happy Path, fully implemented. And the orange ones, those are the things that we are working on, or we have some problem that is not exactly working as we wanted. Obviously, you're not going to spot the differences. But if you see, for example, transfers and agreements and settlements, there's faces there now. We had no faces there 3 months ago. So this is, or 4 months ago. So this is a major improvement. So now we're going to do a live demo. Let me just stop sharing this. Apologies. And I hope that this doesn't fail. It's a lot of responsibility for me, so if anything fails, I messed it up, not the team. So you guys can see this, right? Let me make it as big as possible because you're probably not interested in looking at my desktop. Is this? It's not really readable. You can see it on the other screens. Okay, all right. So this is the admin UI. We're not trying to get any prizes for the UI and for the styling. Don't judge us, and because we're developers, right? So we're not going to get it pretty. Don't ask that of us. So what we have is we have a typical Bootstrap UI that allows us to be really quick, so that we don't work too much on the UI. We don't want to be spending too much time on the UI, but we want to at the same time recognize that a hub operator needs proper user experience. So what we're trying to do is, we're trying to use the UI as much as possible. And the UI talks to the APIs, as I mentioned. And this is on purpose, because if we use it every day, we're going to spot its quirks. So it's like eating your own dog food, and this is something that we need to. And hopefully, as soon as possible, we have other people looking into it, because that effect that I mentioned only applies for a month, because after a month, we know all of the quirks, we know which buttons not to click, and so it doesn't work for too long. So this is the UI. We have a hub. And a hub, in our case, because we're running in a non-productive environment, a hub is automatically provisioned, and the hub automatically creates accounts for that. So what you're seeing in here is the changelog. Each participant, and a hub is a special kind of participant, each participant has a changelog, because this is one of those things where we want to record all of the steps for auditing purposes and for traceability purposes. So this is a high-level business objective that we have, is to show you need to know exactly how things came to be, and this is reflected in the UI. So this is the hub. We have accounts. The accounts are coming from the accounts and balances. We have the ability to refresh the accounts and balances. Again, this is a distributed system. We don't want to be calling everything at all moments, so if you want to refresh this, there's a cost. We need to click the button so that we can refresh it. And we have the certificate authority. That part is not yet implemented. That's part of the onboarding. It's not the Happy Path use case. So this is what the hub looks like, and I'm going to start now by doing the onboarding of a participant. So I'm going to create a participant, as usual. I'm going to create the green bank, because we're not very original with names. So we have a green bank, and what I'm going to do to the green bank is I'm going to configure its endpoint. Its endpoint is going to be pointing. Everything is running in my machine in Docker Compose, which is not necessarily the most interesting detail, but everything is working inside, so I have to use these sorts of endpoints. So this is my endpoint. I'm going to create accounts. And you notice that this is not approved yet, so I can still work on this, and it's not approved. So I can do everything that I want, well, not everything. I can do a lot of activities during the onboarding stage without it being approved. So it's not going to be usable. None of the functionalities of the switch can actually use this participant as of yet. So I'm going to create an account, a position account. I'm going to create a settlement account. We call it settlement. This is actually a liquidity account, but we're using the same enumeration so that the names are sort of the same. And we have an endpoint. You can see the changelog. So everything that I did, you can see what happened. We have more details inside with the auditing. And I'm going to try to approve it. But I cannot approve it. There's a make a check a violation. So the same user that created a participant cannot approve that participant. And this is the rule. So this is just to highlight that we have make a checker in the business logic of the code. So it's designed from the ground up. So let me go back and create another one, because I need to log out to create a new one, to approve them, sorry. So let's create the blue bank. Just give it a description. And I'm going to do the same thing for the blue bank. So I'm going to create, the URL is the same. Actually, this is now TTK2. I have to do this really well, otherwise it's not going to work. So yeah, this is good. Let's create accounts as well. Position account, settlement account. Do you want me to make the screen bigger, the font bigger, or is it readable?
Can you?
Yeah, I can. I was afraid actually it broke the UI, but it didn't. Okay, so we have, again, I'm going to click the same button. I'm going to be a bit of a pain but this is an important aspect that I want to show. So again, I cannot approve this. So what am I going to do? Let me just see if I have everything. My changelog, I have my endpoint, I have my accounts, so I'm going to log out. And I'm going to log in as another user. The user has sort of similar permissions, slightly different role in the sense that that user cannot approve funds movement. So I'm going to try to approve this, and now I can approve it. So a different user approved it. Again, you can see it in the log. So let's go to Green Bank. Approve it. There we are. Okay, so what do you want to do? What do we want to do now? Let's pretend that all of those difficult steps to execute have been executed, and this is running. So the green bank and blue bank are already talking to us, and they are communicating. They're all settled. So we're going to do a first deposit. So I'm going to deposit 1,000 euros. I have the ability to provide an external reference and a note for posterity, and again, I have a funds movement request that I cannot approve because I created it. So I'm going to keep on repeating this part. This is important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go again, log in as admin. Let's see if I don't get it wrong. Okay, so as an administrator, well, not as an administrator, as a different user who has the ability to do this, who has the permission, I'm going to approve this transfer. Sorry, this deposit. So now I have 1,000 that were credited in my liquidity account. And you're asking, where did that money come from? Well, it came from the hub, obviously. So you can see that I had already deposited 1,000 just to make sure that this was working so that it didn't blow in my face. But those 2,000, 1,000 is for this deposit that we did just now. So this is the reconciliation account. Okay, what can we do now? Let me actually check, because I think I now need to hand it off to, yes. Okay, so let me just show you one more detail, which is important, which is we're running, obviously, the wonderful testing toolkit. And we have 2 testing toolkits running, one for the green bank, one for the blue bank, and they are configured to talk to the FSP API that we have running with the Mojaloop vNext instance. So with that, I'm going to pass on to, I don't know if it's Rui or José. I think José, is it you?
Yeah, it's me, Pedro. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm José, and in the past months, I've been collaborating with the rest of the team to develop Mojaloop version vNext. It's a pleasure to be here with the community, and I hope the rest of the demo will enlighten you more about our work. So with that said, let's start the lookup demo. First, let's go to the Oracle section. Okay, as you can see, no Oracle is registered on the system, so let's register one. I'm going, in this case, to register a built-in Oracle with the MSI-SDN type associations. Okay, and I'm going to call it built-in Oracle. Yeah. Okay, it's created. We can see
sorry, I called it Oracle name because I'm
no problem. It's let's say it's a detail. Okay, well, now I'll check it to see if it's running. Okay, nice.
It is running.
Okay, nice. After the register, okay, after this, I have my lookup system ready to respond to lookup requests. Okay. Now let's create an association using the participant blue bank. Okay. Type MSI-SDN. It's okay, and let's say we can give it now a party ID that can be, let's say, 1, 2, 3 for being more easy to test. Okay. Now let's associate it. Okay, we have our association created. This step is usually performed by the FSP that owns the party account. So now we can see if our association is created on the association tab. Okay, it's there. Okay, after this created association, we can ask 2 relevant questions. If we go to the test calls, please. Okay, the get participant, where we ask the account lookup system which participant is associated with or owns the party account. So in this case, let's make this request as the green bank. Okay, can we make the request? Okay, yes, the MSI-SDN. Okay, it's all good. Okay, the get participant. In the response, if we go into the testing toolkit, we can see that the system indicates the identifier of the participant who owns the party. Okay, in this case should be yeah, this one. Okay, that should be the blue bank. Okay, so going back to the test calls, we can ask also the get party, where we ask the participant for information about the party. Okay, let's make this request again as the green bank. Okay, correct. So if we go to the TTK, okay, the blue one, okay, we are receiving the information from the blue bank that owns the party. Okay, and can we expand it? Okay, not the request, the response. Right? Yeah. No, can you go back to the green bank? Just see, I think. Oh, yeah, okay, sure. Here. Okay, thank you.
So this is
okay, go back. Yeah, this is the response that we get, basically with the information about the party. And yeah, the blue bank also in the previous toolkit sent us the response with the information of the party, and since we are making the request as the green bank, we receive the information from the blue bank that owns the party. Okay. So with this last call, I'll conclude the account lookup workflow and hand over to my colleague Rui, so we can talk more about the quotes and also the transfers. Thank you.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, Rui, go for it.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be working with contributions on the Mojaloop API Next project. Same as Jose, I've been working for the past few months together with Pedro, Jason, and the rest of the team on developing a few of the bounded contexts that belong to the current Next version. And as Jose was mentioning, I will now start the presentation for the quotes. So the quotes is the operation where we ask between two different participants the costs of making a transfer. So Pedro, please, if you can, clear the calls.
Clean this.
Yeah. And if you go to the quote section, we have the create quote button on the top right corner.
So okay. This is an example as well.
Yeah. So as Pedro mentioned, we have a lot of fields here to fill in. So we have this button which generates random values so that it's easier for us to test these use cases. So we have everything filled in. So Pedro, please press the create button, create quote button. So what this will do is it will create a quote through the bounded context. And afterwards, we shall be able to see exactly. So what happened here was that it was way too quick in changing the state of the quote, since it starts with pending and then it gets either rejected or accepted. But if we go to the TTKs, we can see the flow of the answers between the different participants. So here we can see that the quote was created on the blue bank, and the blue bank then answered with the specific information that matters to the quote to the green bank in the request on the top. Yeah. So if you can open it and open the request put info. So this is all information that is more readable on the admin UI for obvious reasons, but as you can see, we have the relevant information such as the condition, the LP packet, and the fees and commissions that FSPs have to pay. So please go back to the admin UI, and here you can see, as you were seeing before, the relevant information regarding this specific quote. And we also have the LP tab, where you have the condition and the LP packet. And so in this tab, we have the quote, and the consequential step after will be to create a transfer over this specific quote, right? So Pedro, if you may create a transfer regarding this quote ID. The transfer ID must match the transaction ID that was specified in the quote. And as we can see, we already have this automatically filled in, which is a really nice to have so that we can test this. So Pedro, if you may create a transfer, please. And similarly to the quote, the transfer has been created. And as you have been able to notice now, the status has changed from being pending to committed. And if we go back to the TTKs, it wasn't cleaned up, but basically the last two calls are regarding the transfers. And similarly to the quotes as well, we have the request to the Blue Bank, which then answers back with the relevant information regarding the transfer itself. So if you go back to the Green Bank on the top, exactly, and we check the request on top, we can once again see the information and the state has been changed to committed. And in the transfers, once again, we can see this in a more pleasant view. And yeah, with this, the transfer is committed, and this is the demo of the transfers. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rui. Okay, so this is everything that you've seen is actually working. That's the first comment. This is not magic. It's going through the TTK. That's why we, and by the way, thank you for the TTK. It's such a valuable tool. Everything that you've seen is we have these forms that facilitate our life when we're testing. Obviously, a quote is not going to be created from an admin UI, but it could be consulted in the admin UI, and the transfer is the same thing. So what we have is we've developed these tools so that we can test things as we develop, so that we are not having to go to Postman every time, and it also helps us make sure that everything is working properly. So this is also something that we think a hub operator in the future, and by the way, this will be disabled when this is in production mode, a hub operator can use to test all of the flows. So you have a nice way of testing things that doesn't require fiddling with a database or going to Postman or sending requests by hand, which you will still have to do, but our intention is let's try to lower that to an absolute minimum. Okay, so we've been doing transfers, and this is very ungrateful in the sense that we showed this in 5 minutes, and this took us 2 months to do. So there's a lot of work that goes behind all of this, and this little transfer that goes from Green Bank to Blue Bank and then he comes back, it's really something that that was a lot of work. And one thing that is important for me to mention is that we used not exactly, but we used the same structure and the same approach that was built in the performance and scalability POC. So we don't have exactly everything the same way. We have slight differences in the sense that we have a simpler version for now, but we are using the same patterns, the same principles, and the same benefits will be achieved. So this is transfers, and obviously this is just the clearing part of the system, and we need to do the settling part of the system. And this is where I'm going to invite Jason Brewer and Michael Richards to help out with the rest of the demo, because we have a bit more to demonstrate here today. So Michael Richards. Oh, Michael Richards is not here. Jason, are you here?
I'm here, yes.
All right.
Michael got
so take me through it.
All right. So as Pedro mentioned, now we've got a transfer, and that transfer has been fulfilled. So now the obligation is being created. So it needs to be in settlements. So if you can click the search in settlements button, and very importantly, we can see there the settled is the flag indicates no. And yeah, we want to now be able to search for this transfer in settlements. So if you can hit the button, please, Pedro. Okay, and this is where we coming to the transfer that is now in settlements. And as we can see there's a batch ID associated with this transfer, and that is the batch where this transfer has been allocated to. And part of the batch identifier, which is something that again we are busy expanding on, but in this example we can see that the batch identifier has the settlement model, the currency, the date in which the timestamp at which the batch starts, along with the sequence counter at the very end, as mentioned earlier. So it's very clear now to see, there we go, there's a transfer and it's been allocated to a batch and it has not yet been settled. So the next step would be for us to request the settlement matrix in order to, look up those batches. And please, Michael, fill in at any
Yeah,
time.
Michael's here now.
Okay,
Sorry.
no worries.
So yeah, I use this criteria, the default settlement model. It's the only one that we have right now. The currency for which the transfer was performed with, and then this starting date and the ending date. And when we search, we will find the batch ID that Jason mentioned. So there's a transfer that was already allocated to this batch ID. So if I click it, I can see that in this batch ID, in this batch, settlement batch, I have the transfer that I did just a few minutes ago.
Yes.
Michael, do you want to take us through the create matrix?
No.
No, okay. Jason, please.
Okay, yeah, so this is
create a
where,
matrix?
Sure. So this is where we're now creating the settlement matrix request, and we've got a settlement matrix. And as you can see on the top right-hand corner is that matrix ID that was mentioned earlier, where you are now able to essentially have a static view that you can look at your own convenience as an operator to see what the balances are, the batches as at the bottom can be seen at the bottom there. So right now we've only have one batch. So we can see the batch there. We can see the participants associated to the batch. If you can just click the participants tab there, maybe I'm jumping around a bit. I should have talked about the top properties first. But there we
should we create another? Let's create another transfer. Should we?
Yes. Well, before we do that, let's look at the participants over there, and we can see that obviously we've just done a single transfer where we debited the green bank and we credited the blue bank, and so there's our single transfer. So yes, you better let's create another transfer and see which batch it ends up in.
Okay, so I'm going to use the same quote. I'm just going to use a different transaction transfer ID, and I'm going to create a transfer. So hopefully it's reserved and committed. Those are two states. It's the consequence of the prepare step, and then the committed is the consequence of the fulfill step. So this is created, Jason. Should I go to the matrices and
let's go that. So do we still have that? Is this still the same matrix that we created earlier? So now we've got the option of creating a brand new matrix request, or we can recalculate the one that we've already have. Either option is no problem. So let's refresh. Okay, so now we can see the criteria has not changed. So our lookup criteria hasn't changed, but we've refreshed our matrix, which means that it's now going to pick up any other batches that form part of the qualifying criteria for whatever the lookup was. And as you can see, it was a from date, a to date, a currency, and the settlement model. And there we can see we've got two batches now associated with this matrix. And if we can go and look at the participants, there should be no difference there because we still need that tied back into central ledger and participants BC in order to update those liquidity accounts accordingly. And then lastly, and then obviously at the top section, we can see the currency and the balances. And then lastly, we can see we've got our two transfers that we created. So this shows very nicely how you can go down to seconds, so near real-time settlement for how you can configure these batches, and it will just keep on doing its thing.
Did I settle?
Let's settle these, yes. So now we are settling these two batches. All right, and there we go. The settlement has the settlement matrix is now closed, and because of that, the batches are also closed now, as well as the accounts.
Jason, give me just a second, because we only have 1 minute, not because of Simeon, but because of the batch. Let me create another transfer really quickly to show off an important aspect of the settlement. There, so now let's go to the matrices. Okay, so continue, please.
Okay, so do you want to show that transfer now not being part of this matrix, or shall we close off the? Okay, so now these two batches exist. So let's say, for instance, now this matrix is closed. So these are now final, and as a consequence of this, the settlement balances will now be sent to the external systems in order to update those necessary liquidity accounts, and this is closed off. Now we can do another settlement matrix request, so let's do one in order to, and we can use the same criteria, and there we see. So those two batches that were part of the previous settlement matrix have been closed, but guess what? Now, because there's an overlap in the time span for our default batch rules, it detected that for this batch that we've got at the row number 2 there, that was created at 4/21/59, is overlaps with the batch creation or normal day-to-day batch operation rules. So now, instead of modifying all of those, we simply increment the sequence counter. So this achieves obviously two things. It makes sure that we can constantly keep creating batches and making sure that when we close batches, we don't have transfers that goes into those batches, and operationally make it a lot easier for hub operators to identify any problematic batches, transfers, etc. So you would always be able to obviously look up data from any one of these points. But there we go. So there's a sequence increment, and that batch is now still open.
Can I just add something there, Jason?
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, this is just to say, of course, this situation came about because Pedro settled a batch before it had come out of its time window. But a much more likely scenario for this is if someone raises a question in relation to a particular transfer, you can manually close the batch to which that transfer belongs. So those transactions will be isolated, and automatically you will get another sequence of the same batch to which you can continue to add new transfers that are coming in. So it enables you, hopefully, to isolate as few transfers as possible in the case of someone raising a dispute in relation to a transfer.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Jason, I'm going to create a new matrix with this criteria. It's exactly the same criteria. So what you're going to see is that the batches that were already included are not going to be included because they were closed. Not because they were included, sorry, but because they were closed already with another matrix. So if I create this new matrix, you will only see that batch that has the sequence number ending in 2. So it's the second one in the sequence. So this is an important aspect. This illustrates what Michael was mentioning right now. That transfer was supposed to be allocated to the same batch, and it was, but because the original batch within the 5-minute session that's configured was already closed, it created a new one so that we can settle that one independently. And a quick thing that that's interesting to show is we now have the ability to pick up, for example, a transfer ID, filter here. I'm going to see this transfer. I'm going to open the transfer, and I can search it in settlements. So, and I can see that this transfer was not yet settled. What I can also do is show one that actually has been settled, which is what I intended to. So I'm going to search it. It's going to tell me, oh, sorry. I bet this is a bug. I don't know who put it in. Probably me. No, here it is. So what you can see now is that in that list, you have the list of the settlement transfer, which is a view of the transfer in the settlement system, which is obviously a smaller view that has only what matters for the settlements. And you can see that this transfer was settled as part of that matrix. So this is how you can find where's that lost transfer. And it's really easy to find. You can find it. If it's not settled yet, you can find its batch, and then you can close a matrix with that batch inside. So this is hopefully something that, will help out.
Sorry, and indeed, going back to the scenario that I talked about before, we will be able to search for an individual transfer by ID, find out the batch that it's in, and then manually close that batch in the case where a transfer is disputed.
Okay, so I know that we're running out of time. Well, first I want to thank Jason and Michael. Jason for implementing this, and Michael for helping a lot and the guidance. We had lots of good and very interesting discussions doing this mini project. And as Michael said before, I think this was a great example on how we collaborated with multiple work streams. This was really fantastic. What we have today now, well, it's not yet ready, but what we will have very soon is a mechanism that was built as part of VNext that can be deployed independently with the central ledger that can benefit everyone. So it means that it works with central ledger and the transfers in central ledger with the missing adaptations that we need to do, as well as in the future when VNext is released. So this is really important, and it is really important collaborative exercise that we performed. So I want to thank these two guys, and obviously Paul Macon and Paul Baker as well. They helped a lot as well. So thank you all. Not all, sorry, I have more. So thank you to that team specifically for this point, because this is an example on how to collaborate. All right, so thank you.
And to you, Pedro. Yes. And
Thank
Michael.
you. Okay, Jason, any more? I think I'm going to, Simin is next to me, so I'm going to continue the presentation, sorry. Yeah, it's really quick. Okay, sorry. So let me just go back to my presentation. And I do know I can start from here. I don't want this. Okay, so we did this, just gonna go through the stuff that we did. Okay, so one question, where's the interoperability API? So where's ML API adapter? It's been all the time in there. So actually, whenever we do requests, we are always doing the requests to the ML API adapter equivalent of Mojaloop VNext, which is what we call the interoperability API. That's the one that in turn transforms those protocols into what we use inside Mojaloop VNext, which is what we call the canonical model. Hopefully, in the near future, we can start doing an implementation POC for ISO 222, and showing the ability that we have and the design that we have that enables us to have different sorts of APIs on the outside that can send messages to the inside. I know there's a lot to unpack there, but this is the desire. This is the dream. Okay, what you saw were 20 microservices running in Docker container in my machine. By the way, this is not a new Mac. This is a 7-year-old machine. So everything that you saw, including Zoom, was running in my machine. And these are 20 microservices. And what it shows is, if you'll later have time to look at this, but what it shows is all of those bounded contexts that you've seen, they actually are made up of multiple services. And there's different levels of complexity depending on the type of service. You will see services that are not high performant, so they don't need many services. You'll see, for example, transfers and settlements that need a different way of performing. We need to distribute the parts differently so that we can achieve the high scale and high performance. So when can you use it? Not right now. So this is the roadmap to alpha. What we are working now is towards a release, an alpha release. And an alpha release is exactly for developers. So what we want to have by the end of June is something that any developer or technically inclined person that has no fear of trying pre-beta solutions has the ability of trying VNext, Mojaloop VNext on their computer and help us out with feedback, because we really need feedback. So this is the roadmap up until today. We anticipated the settlements. That was not expected, and we were able to anticipate the settlements by 1 quarter. So that's what we have. We are now going to continue with the settlement transfers maturity. What we are going to do as well in the next phase until the end of the next PI is we're going to mature all of this. So to release the alpha, we're now going to put the rest of the use cases, the non-happy path use cases, we're going to increase the documentation, increase the test coverage levels, and make sure that what we have is ready for alpha release so that everyone can start using it. So one quick comment that I need to make, what we have in here is still changing every now and then. So it's really important that we don't have anyone from the outside using it in something that might break, because this team does not want to break anything to anyone else. So we are still in a level where sometimes we change things. So it looks stable, it's not yet super stable, so we really need to complete that. As soon as we release the alpha version, you can use it, and we promise we won't break it anymore. So that's the target. Those are the target dates, end of Q2 alpha, and then the beta release. What we really need is that when we release the alpha, there's a lot of people that want to use it and a lot of hub operators that want to provide feedback and test it so that we can have very valuable feedback on how this is working and what we are missing, especially in terms of UX, because that's probably one of the areas where we really need feedback about how to use this UI that we're building. Okay, so what's in the alpha release? Onboarding, lookups. I'm going to skip all of this because I think you guys have seen it. So can you get anything before the alpha? We will have, and this was Paul Macon's idea, which I think is really a good idea. We're starting to do fortnightly workshops for the Mojaloop vNext. And these are initiatives where we will have, anyone can join. You just join in, ask for questions. We will show the code. We will show things working. We will show the progress. It's a bit like a typical agile sprint show and tell, which is the end of the sprint. We do a demo. Anyone can ask anything, and we'll be doing these demos. So for developers, you can already use Docker Compose. It's available if you're brave enough. Where do you join? I don't know yet. Actually, Paul Macon, how do we join this? I'm just announcing it.
I was just about to send out the invitation as you were speaking. I was waiting till today to do it. So I'm just working on it right now. Very timely question.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so obviously this would not be possible without the team. So I want to thank the team. And actually, this slide is outdated. This is actually what the team looks like now. So I want to say thank you to everyone that's participating in this effort, because it started with 1 or 2 developers, and there were some very lonely moments during this stage. And as we are picking up speed, we're also picking up people willing to help. So this is really important. So I want to thank Coil, Elijah, Gonzalo, Crosslake, obviously, DissaWorks for helping out with this. And I really believe that this is going to go much faster from now on. So thank you all, and thank you to the team. It worked.
All right, do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Thank you.
Oh, no, actually, yes. All right, we're down to the final session, so which is for today, which is the Mojaloop APIs. I promise I will get you out of this room by 5. So hang in there. Sam, and then Sam also has a couple of friends online who will join us on Zoom, so.
Thank you, Simeon. Henrik, Julie, are you able to speak? Miguel?
I hope so.
Hi.
Michael?
Yes.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
last session before we end the day. Henrik, yeah, we can see you. Miguel, we can see you. Julie, if you're okay with it, yeah, we can see you. Thank you. So who is excited? This is the last session of the day. Okay. All right. So what is this whole API business? So what is the change control board? What are the special interest groups? I hope all of you know this, but if there are members here, we don't know what this is. This session is aimed at addressing that and maybe removing that intrigue from what this is. All this is. So we have on the call Henrik, Julie, Michael, and myself are here, of course, and Miguel as well. And some, if not most of them, are actually acting as conveners on a voluntary basis. So thank you so much for your contributions. And first, maybe we can start off with introductions. Henrik, can we start off with you?
Yes, hello everyone. Very nice to see you all, even if it's only through a camera. My name is Henrik Karlsson and I'm based in Austria, but I am originally from Sweden. I'm working for Ericsson as a system architect and a product owner for our Ericsson Wallet platform. Part of my job is to drive standardization for financial services within Ericsson. And part of this is then to drive the Mojaloop interoperability API SIG. But I'm also active in other forums such as the GSMA Mobile Money API. I have been involved in this FSP interoperability API since 2016, when the project started between 4 leading mobile money technology providers. If you have any questions regarding the Mojaloop FSP interoperability API, then please just contact me.
Hi, I'm Julie. I work for a company called Passio, who basically settlement of value within a network. I just joined a month ago. Actually, prior to this, I work for a company called Web Compass Labs. We focus on payment transformation. This is when I came across Mojaloop. So in 2020. And since then, I've been working mainly with Michael, Paul as well on ISO 222 and also cross-border payments. My background is payments, so I've been in the payment industry for more than 10 years now. Like I said, working for consultancy and also vendor in this space.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie.
I think I'll go next.
Michael and I, sorry?
Should I go next?
Miguel, Michael and I, we already introduced ourselves. So I'm thinking we'll skip that and jump right
Okay,
into the
all
questions.
right. Yeah, that's fine.
So the first question, I want to keep this, the last session of the day as brief as possible. So I hope you can understand. How can an implementer, so we've seen Titsa works and we have the Rwanda size now, and of course the vNext implementation team as well. How can an implementer or an adopter of Mojaloop get engaged with the various special interest groups and ask for changes, advice, and report bugs?
Well, so each of the areas that we've talked about has its own special interest group. And basically, that special interest group is responsible for the proposing changes to the APIs in their area. They have regular meetings. Those meetings are open to anybody who's interested. And although, of course, Sam rightly emphasized implementers and operators of existing Mojaloop systems, we're also interested in people with a general industry background who can help us in these particular areas. Now, the APIs are all published. They're all published on the community site. So if you want to know what's in them now, then you can go and look there. I'm also producing a document that for the community site, which is intended to tell you which areas have their own API special interest groups, and to give you the addresses of the conveners leaders of each special interest group so that you can get in touch and find out when the meetings are. But we'd really like more involvement from the wider community. You don't have to be a specialist in APIs, though it's nice if you are, but really we have to think about how to modify the APIs to meet the requirements, the evolving requirements of payment systems and of Mojaloop payment systems in particular. So if there are things that you wish Mojaloop did, then probably the place to start is either with the product council or with the relevant special interest group to talk about the APIs, because very often there are ways in which you can use the APIs to do things, but it's not obvious from looking at them. So these are areas where we can improve.
You already preemptively answered the question that I was going to ask, Michael. Thank you. So I was going to ask, where does the CCB and the special interest groups fit in? We talked about the product council, the DA. So let's move on to the next one. So we have these change requests to the APIs and then solution proposals. So how does this process work for the APIs? Miguel, will you be able to take that?
Yeah, sure. In fact, if I can share my screen, I can show you how more or less this works. Just so anyone can actually see this. Yeah. Let me know if you can see my screen. I'm also going to zoom in.
We can see it now.
Can you see it? Okay, I'm zooming in. Is that big enough? Okay. All right, so just to go back to where the APIs are, if you go to the docs.mojaloop.io, there is an API tab here. Here you can access the specifications at the moment, right? Okay, sorry, just to get back to your question. So how we handle change requests and proposals, we have under the Mojaloop GitHub org, we have a Mojaloop and in here, this is where we actually have all and where we collaborate. For example, to come or a change or something simple as going to the issues tab, and we already have predefined templates. Sorry, my connection is a little bit slow. Can you guys still hear me?
We can now. We can hear. It's a bit delayed, but go ahead.
Hello? Okay, sorry. I think my connection is incredibly slow.
Why don't you talk through the process and I'll share the screen.
Okay, all right. So if you go to the issues tab, if you click on the new issue button on the top right, it should take you to a list of what you can create. So you're going to have an option of a change request, right? So if you're thinking of basically making a change to an API, generally how that works is a change request is first created, right? And the idea behind that is that's an open discussion about what you want and what the functionality is that you're looking for. And basically it's a discussion in terms of how more or less it can go about doing it. And then a solution proposal generally is what happens when the change request is approved, right? And so it's easy as going in here and basically clicking one of these things, and then literally you'll get a pre-populated document that you need to fill out with information that you need, right? Like this. So you enter your yeah,
So
go for it.
can I just add, Miguel? You don't have to have a solution. All you have to have is a problem.
100%.
So, you know, so if you want something but you don't know how to get it, then a change request is the way to submit it. And it'll be discussed, and eventually we will arrive at an idea for a solution, and that will be the solution proposal for that change request. So we're not asking you to know in advance how to solve a problem. We just want you to articulate the problem.
And if I may add, I think the CCB and the special interest groups encourage everyone to actually discuss this problem first, so that you don't have to go through this whole process by yourself. The special interest groups will help you go through that and help fill the templates if needed. Miguel, thank you. Continue, please.
Yeah, a good example of that, for example, just to show you more or less what that looks like in reality, right? If I'm just using ZenHub here, you need a ZenHub plugin for you to see this in GitHub, but you can access this from ZenHub. This is basically just a Kanban or a kind of more sprint view in terms of what sprint lane kind of view of what we have. If you come to this board, you can actually filter, and you can also filter in the issues board as well, but this is just a nicer view by the labels that we want. So for example, over here, admin API change request. And a good example is this one where we want extra properties for participants to be added. And so here you can see basically the form, the change request form has been filled out, and there's basically active communication between several parties in terms of what that looks like. This is basically the requirements. They even have screenshots to kind of convey some of those ideas, etc. And then down below, we have active discussions in terms of what would that look like, and potentially working towards something that might be solution orientated. Yep, I think that's about it.
Thank you, Miguel. It's a great summary. So let me ask this question, starting off with Hendrik. Hendrik, which version of the API is currently the standard? And if you want to provide any other context to that, please go ahead.
Yep. The current version that we have right now is 1.1.1. This was released in September 2021. So the API has been fairly stable since we released it in 2018. But we are working both on version 1.2 and version 2.0. And these will then be finalized when they are required by a project.
Thank you, Hendrik. Miguel?
So I'm convening of two APIs, specifically the operational admin API as well as the settlement API. The admin API or the operational API has been very stable. It's on version 1. and we haven't actually had any changes or solution proposals yet. We've had some change requests to potentially enhance it. As you saw, one of them to add additional properties to participants. And we, for settlements, we're in version 2 already. However, from a future perspective, we are mostly working towards a new version of settlements, which is the vNext API. Most likely, we are going to adopt very much what's already being done as part of that work stream, but we are in the process of reviewing it. And there are also possibly some changes to the existing version of the admin API to accommodate the integration of the settlement vNext work into the current Mojaloop implementation at the moment. So I think that's what's more or less coming in the future from those two APIs perspective.
Thank you, Miguel. Julie, any context you want to offer on the ISO 20022 group, where we are, what the roadmap looks like?
Yeah, sure. So on our side, like we are basically in the process of defining the first version. So as Michael explained this morning, the idea is effectively to work with the RMG ISO 20022 committee to effectively understand what are the change requests we need to be able to actually use the ISO 20022 standard.
Can I just say one thing? You've probably noticed that on the list of special interest groups was 3PPI, or third-party payment initiators, and it had next to it then the illustrious name of JJ GWAX from Google. Now, that's essentially a memorial entry because JJ has now gone off to work on the dark side. He's now working for Meta. So he is no longer able to give us the fruits of his expertise. So help wanted. We need a convener for this special interest group. Someone who's interested in working on enhancements to the third-party payment initiator API. Now, you've heard over the course of this convening how important we think getting the engagement of third parties of various kinds is to increasing take-up in the Mojaloop system. Now, that means making sure that we have a third-party payment
Seems like we've lost connection with them. I'm just going to check really quick. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
I was worried that was me.
Oh, I think you're muted. Could you unmute, please?
Sorry?
Thank you. Oh, you were muted for a second. Thanks.
Oh, right. So I was muted just as I was about to say that Julie is a shining example of someone who contributes as the convener of a special interest group without, I think, being an API expert. So you don't have to be, but if you're interested in it, that's good. So as I say, we really need someone. Please come and contact me if you would like to be that person.
Thank you, Michael, for the pitch. Yeah, we're waiting to hear from you. So the next two questions, I'd like to club them together if that's okay. So we'll ask the groups. Henrik, so what changes were approved during the last quarter or the program increment? And if you can you cover what's on the pipeline?
Yep, certainly. Since the last convening, we had one change that has been approved for version 1.2, and that is to better support financial platforms where a reservation for a transaction can't be made. So if a payee FSP sends that it has committed a transaction, but then for some reason the transaction fails in a switch, then the switch can send out an error notification to inform the payee FSP. And then some of the changes that we are discussing, we are currently discussing if the same can be provided for bulk to be able to send out that error notification. And we are also discussing how to identify a request in the participant endpoints, because it's not possible to identify single request there at the moment. And the specific use case here is to prevent the FSPs from registering account holders as having their default account as an FSP. And then we're also discussing FX support within the API. And one additional change request that we are discussing is adding an opaque element for KYC information. This opaque element will then allow the scheme to decide what format to use and which information to include as part of that. And then we just, before the convening now, discussed the process of bulk quotes. Currently in the API, that is defined to that the payer FSP defines a bulk into separate requests to each payee FSP. But in the reference architecture and in vNext, the switch can perform that for you. The drawback with that is that you won't get an end-to-end signature, as the switch will do some processing for you. But we'll continue with that discussion after the convening.
Thank you, Henrik. Great summary. I was going to ask you to touch on the FX as well, but thanks for doing that. Michael, anything you want to add on the FX side?
Yes, I realized that Henrik brought this up as a way of saying, Mike, you promised every meeting for the last 6 meetings to do something on FX and you still haven't done it.
Thank you, Michael. Miguel, we again have two APIs, the settlement and administration. Can you cover what changes were made, approved, and what's on the pipeline?
So as I said, nothing really has been approved in the last PI, but as previously mentioned, basically most of the changes that I suspect are going to be coming out of this PI are going to be related to the settlement changes. So once again, there are changes that probably need to happen to the operational API to support some of the changes for settlements going forward, or even potentially removing some APIs to support the changes as well, deprecating rather, should I say. Of course, potentially the adoption of the vNext settlement API, which will probably be settlement version 3. I would hope so. Yeah.
So my view is, and I think Pedro will agree with me on this, there is no vNext API. vNext is a way of processing the existing APIs. And as Pedro said in his presentation, it's certainly possible to imagine that people might build completely different Mojaloops. But as long as they have the same APIs and can run the same tests and pass them, we say, great.
Thank
Correct.
you, Miguel.
Well, that's what settlement v3 is going to be, right? That's going to support the batches and all those kind of new settlement paradigms that we want to introduce, right, with the vNext. But yeah.
Thank you, Miguel. Michael. Julie, anything you want to add for that? The 4.2 and 3?
I think, I just would like to add a call for action. We really need some people in the working group, because it takes actually some time, and sometimes Michael and I disagree. So we need some referees to sort of settle on what would be the best solution on some of the change we are trying to implement within the again ISO 20022 framework. So as Michael mentioned earlier, we are currently in the process of requesting changing for the PAX OA, and then we look then at other type of messages and then apply the same process, which is looking at the current standard, looking at what Mojaloop need, and trying to find either a place in the existing standard, or when we cannot find a place, request for a change.
Thank you so much, Julie. If I may ask, can please give a big round of applause for our conveners? Thank you. Thank you, Henrik, Julie, obviously JJ as well, Miguel, Michael, and others who contributed to this. The rapporteur and convener role are elected roles for the CCB. So if you're interested, consider applying during the yearly election cycle. And thanks for sitting here and following the CCB and SIG's update. I'll give a chance to Michael to give a final word and close it. Thank you.
Well, I suppose the only final word I have is to give a special thanks to Sam for his indefatigable organization of the sometimes complex discussions that we have. Thanks very much, Sam.
Oh, we can't hear you, Simeon. Sorry. Thank you.
Check. There we go. Excellent. I promised to let you out of the room at exactly 5. It is exactly 5, but it's important for me to note the following. Now, there's a reason why Mojaloop is built in the structure of a community. One of those reasons is that it gives you a say in the direction of the development of Mojaloop. Now, as Paul mentioned, we need your nominations for new work streams. Now, tomorrow, please be in the room at exactly 10. One of the things we'll engage in is everyone will get us a chance to have a say on new work streams through a vote. So again, if you're not in the room, you can't make the decision. So please be in the room tomorrow. Actually, Paul, I'll let you voice this. Paul, are you online?
Thanks, Simeon. I think you've pretty much said it, but I need to know what work streams that people in the room, people in the community want us to work on in the next PI. If you don't speak up before 10 a.m. tomorrow, it won't be in the next PI. So thanks everyone. This is your final call. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening. See you tomorrow, bright and early at 10 in the morning. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.